Hey guys, Ethan here. I'm getting over a cold right now, so don't mind me if I sound funny, or if I look like I'm hacking up a lung. Um, this week's topic is our coming out process. So this is going to be a long, winding story for me. Um, so I may have mentioned before that the first person I guess I came out to was a friend of mine that I met in Chinese school when I was about 12 or 13, so around middle school age. Um, she's the person I like to call my mother or pseudo mother, because she was really the first person that I talked about my problems to. For some reason, she just managed to get past all my defenses, and I basically would spend hours just bawling my eyes out in front of her and telling her like my life story. Um, and after a couple of these sessions, I guess, she was actually the one that told me that perhaps I'd be happier as a boy, and this idea kind of frightened me. Um, so I actually, I guess I saw it as permission from then to explore it for myself. Um, So I guess I came out to her first, I guess. More like she pulled the coming out story out of me, or she came out for me, maybe. I don't know. Um, but she was the first person I told, or explained to myself. Um, and almost immediately after that, I went onto the internet to look up information. Um, I didn't really tell anybody I was trans on the internet. I mean, I would read, I guess, threads in the forums and I'd gather information, but I never really participated. Um, and it wouldn't be until high school that I mentioned these thoughts about being trans to anyone else. Um, for the longest time, most people just assumed that I was lesbian because I was dressing male. And when I did end up telling uh, some of the closer friends, I was just largely met with, I guess, confusion. I mean, it wasn't hostile, it was just confusion. Like, they would, I guess the initial thought was just, isn't that just gay? What is trans really? Another, I guess, notion that came up, or another idea that came up was that this was perhaps something selfish, and I didn't take that as a bad thing. Um, like I didn't take that as a completely like slap to the face. Um, this was because like for me, I did feel that it was kind of selfish. Like one of the initial concerns was that this would be a burden to my dad, and because he already had to deal with my mother's schizophrenia, like to bring something else that could be seen as a mental illness um, up did feel extremely selfish. Um, but through those conversations, I also realized that I had it was selfish, but I had to frame it as being self-ish, as in I needed this to be a complete self. Like I needed to build myself. I needed to articulate myself, construct myself, I guess. Um, and while it was unfortunate that it would potentially be a burden to the people around me, I needed this to live. And in my head, I also realized to a certain extent that unless I felt whole, I would not be able to come back and serve the people that I love lives to the best of my abilities. So that's how I dealt with those feelings of, I guess, Asian shame or whatever, or guilt. Um, so while my, I guess, initial group of friends weren't extremely knowledgeable about it, I mean, I wasn't very knowledgeable about being trans either, or the whole trans thing. Um, they were supportive, and they are supportive. Um, I, I basically kept it at that. I mean, I mentioned these thoughts and these emotions, but I didn't act on them. And it wouldn't be until late freshman year of college that I made my first, I guess, big move to do something. And what I did was I wrote an email to my dad because I couldn't do it to his face. I basically sat in my dorm room freshman year. I think it was winter semester, maybe spring, and I just wrote a really long email, explaining to him my emotions, my thoughts, um, but not sure how he would take those because being at least perceiving him as a logic-driven person, I also gave him the the textbook psychology definition of gender identity disorder just to give him something to frame the whole thing, I guess. Um, and then I told him my intentions of actually of medically transitioning. And then I stayed up all night to get his response. Um, I didn't expect him to disown me. I mean, my dad is not the kind of person to do that. And the fact that he sticks around with my mom, like, showed me that he wasn't the kind of person to disown anybody. I was afraid of losing his approval. Like, to me, that is the biggest deal. Um, because I knew he wouldn't cut me off financially, but I knew there was a possibility that he might not want to talk to me at all, and that I would largely be alone in this entire endeavor. Um, and his response kind of reflected, like, or kind of confirmed those thoughts. Um, he wrote back in an email saying that he would be supportive, that as his child he wouldn't disown me, and that as a parent it was his job to help me through whatever problems and difficulties I was having in life. And so I knew I was safe for now. Um, but with most, I guess, confusing and scary, I guess, and threatening things, um, we didn't talk about it. Like, we tend to deal with things that are uncomfortable with silence. So the next time I saw him, like, it was only like email itself only mentioned briefly, and I was so like embarrassed that I didn't pick up, like I didn't pursue the topic. And that kind of tension would be there for quite a while, like I'd say about a year and a half, because I just didn't have the heart to bring it up again. Um, and it wouldn't be until sophomore year that the next step would, I guess, be taken. So sophomore year, I ended up taking um, a psych class um, that was recommended to me by a friend, um, and it ended up changing my life. So there was a there was at Rutgers a professor by the name of Atwood that taught psychology in a very humanistic um, perspective. And I remember thinking to myself that this was and his perspective, this perspective basically reframed psychology for me, because growing up and watching my mother go through the mental health system, sucked. I did not want to be a psychologist. And in fact, my faith in the mental health system was like crap. I didn't think it could help anybody. But what Atwood did for me was that he taught me to give psychology another chance, that there was another way to look at mental disorder, that it didn't have to be looked at as necessarily all biologically caused, but it could be framed as just the extremes of human experience. Um, and I took that to heart. I remember thinking to myself the first couple of lectures while listening to him that this was terrifying. I wanted whatever he was saying to be true, but I know that I was burned by idealization before, so I was scared to pursue it. But eventually, I guess the hope outweighed the fear, and so I went with it, or went for it, and ended up meeting him and a bunch of his TAs. Um, and being, people that want to be therapists, like, we're always digging into each other's, like, histories and stuff. So within, like, I'd say a month, I came out to them. Um, they weren't very knowledgeable about what trans was either, or even just what, LGBT stuff was in general, but because they were humanistic minded, they were supportive. Um, and it was this combination of their support and the ideas they valued that gave me the strength to pursue um, exploring gender for myself even more. Um, so it gave me the strength for the next step, which was looking for a therapist, because I knew if I wanted to be a therapist too, um, then it would be extremely important for me to sort out my own shit, because um, when you don't have your own shit sorted out, it will unconsciously show up in a session of therapy, like between the interactions of you and your patient. So, like, best to get that. I knew it was best to get that squared away as best as I could, as quick as I could. And for me, I knew that meant dealing with gender and my gender identity. Um, so I looked for therapists. I had a couple bad ones, um, who were very, like, not only not knowledgeable about trans issues, but one actually just fell asleep on me, so that was not pleasant. And it was just out of pure persistence, because I knew how important it was for me to be in therapy, that I stuck it through and eventually got a referral and then found someone else who was better, who was more knowledgeable about issues, not as knowledgeable as I needed him to be, but at least he was willing to learn. So that was good. It was also through around this time that I actually met my first trans person, which was a huge deal for me. Um, and it turns out at that point in time, he was the only out trans person on campus. Um, and so when I came out and met him, um, it was, I guess, a big deal for both of us, because then we knew we weren't alone. And the first thing he did was ask if I was willing to sit on the Gender Identity Task Force at Rutgers, which is this group of, I guess, staff and administration that are trying to make Rutgers a friendlier, um, trans-friendlier place. Um, and it was through them that I would eventually make my way into medical transition, as well as the LGBT community at Rutgers, because I was ignoring them for the longest time because I was terrified. Um, So during around I guess junior year, between junior and senior year, that's when all that stuff happened. I met my friend, one token trans guy on campus, and ended up starting to attend student meetings, like I guess student club meetings, in the queer community. And then late senior year, I started T um, through the school. Um, and it wouldn't be until after I started T that I told my mom. Um, and she was probably the last person I wanted to come out to, because of her schizophrenia. I didn't know how she would take it. I didn't know if she would incorporate it into her conspiracy theories, or if she would rant about it, or if she would disown me. Um, and she had to call me out on it. So like 3 months or something into T, I go home to visit, and my voice was starting to drop, and so she asked, and she was just like, "Why is it that your voice sounds funny? Um, why is it that you're starting to walk like your uncle?" She said that to me, and I was really embarrassed because I knew I couldn't, and uncomfortable because I knew I couldn't run from it for forever, because these changes were starting to happen, and she was going to notice, and there was really no turning back. So, excuse me. Um, so I told her what was going on, and to my surprise, she was completely accepting, and she was actually really hurt. She's just like I'm your mother. Why did you tell me last? Like if this is what you feel like you need to do, then you do it. Um, and till this day, she is the only family member that immediately made an effort to use male pronouns and call me Ethan. Like everyone else took like at least like 3 months time or something to get around to it. Like my aunts, my dad's sisters, like both took like I guess about half a year to adjust. And then my mom's side of the family, which who I also was also afraid of because they're kind of religious, um, and the whole Christianity thing like scared me. Like the whole Christianity and like homosexuality thing really scared me. But it turns out they're really cool about it. So, and my mom was cool about it. So you really can't tell like who will be cool, who won't be cool with it. But yeah, so my mom was like the last, I guess, major person in my life, like immediate life environment that I told. And it turns out she took it the best, like without question. Um, so now I just go around telling people that if the schizophrenic can do it, no excuses. um, so yeah, so that's I guess the coming out process, and this is almost 20 minutes, so I guess I should end here. But yeah, if you have any questions or comments, put them below. You know, and yeah, until next time, laters.